People that work on movie sets. What are the most entitled actors you have ever met? I used to work in the film and TV industry. Tyra Banks legitimately will fire some people if they look her in the eye when passing in the hallway. Mostly interns. Ugh. On the plus side, Tom Hanks and David Tennant are genuinely amazing. And Eric Dane. Good guy. Once an actress yelled at one of our new writers, and Eric heard about it. He later came by to apologize publicly in front of the whole cast and crew, even though it wasn't his doing. Love that guy. And someone on the crew later tried to poison that actress. So. Also a TV set. James Corden is an absolute jackass. Not the funny happy-go-lucky guy you see on TV. My favorite James Corden moment was when Jimmy Kimmel won a round of Spill Your Guts or Fill Your Guts by asking Corden to name one cameraman in the room right now. That's the kind of joke that lets you know they hate each other. Can confirm. He has this thing where he won't talk to anyone bar the most senior crew. He treats everyone else like crap. Once witnessed him have a meltdown because the script supervisor, whose job is partly to ensure continuity and keep dialogue true to script, spoke to him directly when the director was occupied. Script supervisors normally filter issues via the director. He thinks he's above everyone, just can't compute people like that. We all started somewhere. Just be nice to people, particularly when they are working hard to make you look good. My sister's ex was a cameraman for an episode of Corden's sports show here in the UK, and when Corden messed up he apparently couldn't accept it was his fault and allegedly got the stage manager fired over it. Worth bringing out the best James Corden story again. A nameless person was on a transatlantic flight in business class and was a little starstruck to see Corden boarding. He acted aloof, wearing headphones and trying his best to remain anonymous, but not being outright shitty. Then came the kicker. Onto the plane came a struggling woman with a small baby. She set down her things in the seat opposite Corden and the viewer waited to see if he'd bristle at the idea of being next to her. Probably loud. Baby all flight. He said nothing and studiously went about reading some script or the other. Disappointed in not seeing him displaying diva tendencies, they soon lost interest. Throughout the flight the woman struggled with the unsettled baby, constantly picking it up when it started crying, hushing and soothing. Still Corden didn't flip. He just turned his headphones up and did his best to ignore the disturbance. After landing, the harried mother was packing all her stuff away as Corden waited patiently to disembark. Finally the snap happened when the woman dropped one of the many bags all mothers have to carry when traveling. Turning to him she said, "At least can you take our daughter for a minute while I sort all this out?" I used to work in the industry for a while. Asked some colleagues about the worst people they've worked with. More than one said Steven Seagal was a grade A D-bag. Another said Mike Myers was a nasty piece of work. From what I hear, Myers is really hard to work with because he's an extreme perfectionist and wants everything done the way he has it in his mind. Apparently he re-recorded his entire performance on Shrek because he wasn't happy with the voice. It was a good decision, because Shrek's voice is pretty iconic at this point, but still a pretty massive change to demand. Seagal brought his mom into the hospital where my ex-wife worked. He parked his car in the ambulance-only area and refused to remove it, citing his authority as a special county deputy sheriff. That's BS, because a real cop wouldn't even do that knowing that it is a huge safety violation. A professor of mine's sister met Jeff Goldblum in LA, and he got her number. Apparently he called her once at 4 a.m. to talk about snow. That was the only time they spoke. My prof worked with Goldblum once. Said he was one of the nicest man he's ever met. He made Mycroft tap dance with him on set apparently. Worked in the business for about 10 years. I found that reality TV stars were the hardest to work with. I worked mostly with stars from Bravo and they were all entitled and horrible. Celebs I've met that were super nice: Rihanna, Mark Hamill, Tony Todd, Peter Dinklage, and Emmanuel Chikwery. I realize this isn't movie sets, but I work the front desk at the most upscale hotel in the city, so I came in contact with a lot of famous people, mostly musicians. We have a giant yearly concert in the hotel's gardens every year. But here's a list of the coolest and worst I've encountered. By far more cool than awful. Journey. By far the biggest divas. Specifically the guitarist. They came into the hotel at 3 AM and he got the biggest suite in the hotel. The one the Prime Minister and the Queen have stayed in. And he stormed down and said it wasn't big enough and he wants a bigger room. After explaining to him that this was the biggest room, he threw a fit and demanded we build him a bigger room or knock down some walls. Cool guy. Slayer. Pretty grumpy. When I told them how much I loved their music growing up, Kerry King just scoffed at me. Demi Lovato walked into the hotel and said, "Oh F that, I'm not staying here," and slept in her tour bus. Martin Sheen. Really reserved. Tried to avoid any contact with others. Motley Crue. Weirdly very nice and well behaved. Machine Gun Kelly. Crick. Partied all night and caused a bunch of damage. Tech 9. Really nice. Stopped to talk to all the staff. Paul Martin. Former Prime Minister of Canada. He was cool, I guess. He shook my hand and that's about it. Justin Trudeau. Current Prime Minister. Really nice, nothing much else to say. Queen. Brian May was cool as SHH. He talked to me for a while and told me some old Queen stories. Adam Lambert was a bitch. Robert England. Super duper cool. I told him Freddy Krueger was the only thing that ever gave me a nightmare as a kid. And he said, "Well, looks like I finally caught you," in his Freddy voice. Got a pic with him choking me. Macy Gray. Amazingly friendly. Talked to me for a good half hour just shooting the SHH. Called me a cool cat and gave me $100 tip. Dallas Green. Another great guy. He was super busy, but I told him how much Alexis on Fire meant to me. So he talked with me for a bit and signed some stuff. Ron McLean, Hockey Night in Canada. Another great guy. Just made fun of Don Cherry. Magic Johnson. Absolute sweetheart. I still can't believe I met him. My friend has worked on Dr. Phil for years. He has a no eye contact rule and is apparently one of the nastiest, most self-absorbed people in the industry. I was playing a background doctor on an ER-type drama a couple years ago. While rehearsing a scene, one of the actresses said to the performer next to me, "Tell him he can't stand there." She was referring to me. I adjusted my position and asked, "Is here okay?" She said, again to the actor next to me, "Tell him I don't care. Just stay out of my way." I asked, "Is there some reason you're not addressing me directly?" and she turned around and walked away. A few minutes later the scene was shot without further incident. I have no idea who this actress is. She wasn't one of the stars. Bam Margera used to frequent a mall where I was managing a store. He was always cool and never seemed pretentious. One afternoon he came in with some friends, and they were all obviously either high, drunk, or both. They were in my store, making a scene, being obnoxious, and started throwing around merchandise. Before I could say anything to them, Bam turned around and yelled for them to stop acting like effing children and to put everything back where they got it. Like good little peons, they did what they were told. He just looked at me and with a long and tired look on his face told me he was sorry about them. So, yeah, Bam seems to be a good guy. Bam is definitely a solid guy. He's from my hometown, Westchester represent, and he would come into the war I worked at somewhat regularly. Always super chill, would take pictures with people who asked and chat with you for a bit. I actually recently just ran into him again in Cali where I was living for the last year or so. Many years ago I worked at UB in Philly. We had a reservation for Don King one night, but he and his large party didn't show. So about 15 minutes past close he calls and says he is running late but will be there in a few minutes. Owner asks essential staff to stay, and about an hour later King and his party arrive. His party eats and drinks until after midnight, but when presented with the check, King says one of his companions was unhappy with the food. The waiter offers to take it off the bill. King makes snarky remark like, "Of course you will." He ends up leaving no tip on a nearly $2,000 bill while making staff work an extra 3 hours. My sister is a writer and has met and worked with lots of people in Hollywood. I asked her who the nicest celebrity she ever met was, and she said without hesitation, Luke Perry. Have not worked on a movie set, but worked for a cleaning company that was hired by production companies that came to the area to film. Alberta, Canada. We would take care of the homes of some celebs. Tom Hardy was lovely, very down to earth and friendly. Would walk by us in the house and always greet us and often talk about the weather and other mundane things. Small talk. His whole entourage was friendly. It was actually quite an enjoyable job. Good pay, easy work, nice environment, etc. When we cleaned Leonardo DiCaprio's place, we were specifically told not to talk or look at him by the contact person my boss had. We wouldn't have spoken unless spoken to first, but the specific request for it made us uncomfortable. One time, one of my co-workers had a close encounter with Leo in his bathroom. She was cleaning while he was coming in. She jumped, apologized and said, "I'll get out of your way." She quickly gathered up all her cleaning stuff and hurried out. He was totally silent and turned his head away from her. It was weird. And just a quick side note, we had a specific way we'd clean so to not encroach on anyone needing the bathroom. Leo's bedroom and bathroom were done when we certain he was up and about or out of the house, and we always went as fast as we could. The previous cleaning company that was there before us was fired because one of the workers said "How are you" or something like that to Leo. That prior knowledge also made it harder working there. Oddly enough though, Leo's entourage had a strange curiosity with us that felt uncomfortable in the opposite sense. Almost like they'd never seen people before, lol. Third hand here, so who knows, but a person I know has worked with Kevin Smith. During the filming of Live Free or Die Hard they were shooting Kevin's scenes. I guess the call time was 7 AM. Everyone is ready, lights on, sound check, yada yada. No Bruce Willis. Turns out he was at a nearby bar having mimosas. The aide that went to get him was told, "I'm John McElcain." What are they gonna do? Fire me or something to that effect? To Kevin's estimation, $90k-ish were wasted in pay, rental fees and whatnot, waiting on Bruce to be ready to go. Faye Dunaway. Faye Dunaway. And I cannot stress this enough. Faye Dunaway. I've had dealings with her personally and can vouch for her entitledness and nastiness, but my friend who works on movie sets has horror stories. Extremely demanding, and also picky. She brings her scales with her everywhere and will make anyone catering weigh it up in front of her. She has a no eye contact rule, which must never be disobeyed, and she also yells and screams when things do not go her way. One time she came into a restaurant I worked at. Waiter came to the table and before he could open his mouth she handed him a measuring cup and said, "Fill this with chicken salad." He told her, "Sorry, we don't have any." She responded, "Of course you do. You love me. You know all my movies," and then she waved him away. Can't remember how that all resolved in the end, but it was weird. If this was anyone else I wouldn't believe you. But yes, that is her 100%. She frequently introduces herself as the Faye Dunaway as if that's supposed to mean something to the average millennial who has to deal with her. Not that it's any surprise to anyone, but Michael Cera is a huge effing a-hole. I watched so many young musicians come up to him during the Sex Bob-omb tour, come up to him to talk about music or gush about how he inspired them, only for him to either brush them off completely, ask them why they are talking to him, or just have security come take them away. Total dick. Yup, worked at wine shop. At closing we are ringing one last guy out. Doors locked. Sarah comes to door. Disappointed we're closed. We can't sell anymore. Guy gives Sarah his own wine, knowing he could not get more tonight, so nice, then asks for a picture for his kid. Sarah says, "Number, what a dick." I worked in fine dining and met quite a few celebs. Shaq was amazingly sweet and it was awesome to watch him walk through a doorway. He had to almost double over to get through the pretty tall double doors attached to the hotel. Magic Johnson was also pretty awesome to the staff when he came in one night. Those dudes can eat and drop some serious dough. John Voight was a weird one. He introduced himself to me by his full name and complimented me up and down, but not in a creepy way, just overly friendly and really enjoying the quiet restaurant at breakfast time. He made me genuinely smile, but I have heard he's a bit cuckoo. My idiot AGM didn't recognize Ludacris and sat him in the very front window of the restaurant with his date. I immediately ran over and asked them if they would like to move to a more private booth in the back, which he looked relieved about immediately. He was nice but reserved and ready to keep his night going. far as I could tell. CeeLo came through the restaurant and had a dog wrapped in his arms. He just hung out and spoke with some guests of his I think who were staying in the hotel. It looked like business but he seemed nice enough. My favorite was meeting the entire cast of Alias right after its heyday, including Ben Affleck in tow, and Bradley Cooper and Jennifer Garner were the sweetest of them all. Bradley has ice blue eyes and called me adorable for answering some of his questions about the historical downtown area we were in, and Jennifer ordered over 4 coups of our chowder. She was pregnant. And Victor Garber and the rest just seemed so down to earth. Drew Barrymore cried over her breakfast about the reviews about her directorial debut with it, which I thought was a great movie, while Justin Long comforted her, telling her they should just go off to a private island for a bit. It was kind of sweet. Kind of escapist from reality. She is very tiny eye roll. I have more info stories if anyone wants. My BF also works in one of the biggest ATL recording studios and I worked in film for a while, but not big time. I went to school with a guy who wound up co-starring in a feature film. I saw him in the bar one night. He walked up to this table of women and said, "So, who wants my autograph?" He even had a pen. The women had no idea who he was because the movie he'd been in was some short-run B movie nobody had even heard of. Insecure people who gain any sort of fame and recognition are the most cringy of all. I have a story I'm telling secondhand. This was in a hotel, not a movie set, so sorry for breaking the rules. Apparently Sylvester Stallone had been angering the cleaning staff because he was leaving SHHTS in the shower. When the manager complained to his people about this behavior, his publicist explained that they had to understand that Mr. Stallone was a very busy man. I haven't worked on movie sets, but I have worked in music. J-Lo and Justin Timberlake were by far the most entitled. They threw fits like children and were just overall very unpleasant. Taylor Swift was nice, but her entourage was, at times, unbearable. They had a holier-than-thou attitude, and her manager acted like a damn dictator. Taylor stopped to take a picture with some employees from one of the restaurants providing food for the artists. Immediately after, her manager yelled to one of her staff members to go over there and make sure they don't use that photo on anything related to the restaurant, social profiles, website, etc. I get it, you have to protect her likeness as a brand, but you don't have to be a giant bitch about it. There is no need to berate and threaten some part-time 19-year-old girl serving food. Chris Brown's entourage was incredibly annoying when it came to the gifting suite. They all wanted to be let in, even though it's just for the artists. Some random ass entry-level label rep expected to be walked to the front of the line. She wasn't even allowed in. His manager even threatened to not have Chris walk through if there was going to be a problem. That didn't work. But in general, the less famous they are, the more entitled they act. The worst offenders are always someone with one hit that you know was only popular because they rode the coattails of whatever trend is hot. They buy into their own hype. I have a friend who works on a lot of movies, so she has worked with a ton of people. From what I remember, here are her thoughts on different people. Jake Gyllenhaal's method acting style and requirements are annoying and strict, so he can often be rude and hard to work with. Lawrence Fishburne initially comes off as a dick and absolutely hates when you call him Larry, but he can swiftly turn that around and be a great guy and your best friend. Keanu Reeves is everything amazing you'd expect him to be, but because he is so personable he doesn't have too many intimate one-on-ones with people. Emma Watson is a bit self-involved. Matt Damon is super cool, funny, and intelligent. James McAvoy is stellar to work with apparently. She also has a huge crush on him. M. Night Shyamalan is apparently an amazing father and one of the best bosses to work for. I've heard several stories about the work he puts into being a great family man. 50 Cent is goddamned hilarious. He was hanging out on set with my friend and a white girl in a kimono walked by and he yelled out "OSHH. They got the Asian jump off in here." Russell Crowe is apparently super down to earth, but he can get a bit isolated if you catch him while he's focusing. Christian Bale acts kind of like Keanu, but he also can be so focused on his work that he kind of forgets to interact with people. Ryan Gosling is apparently hilarious and lovely. Bryan Cranston is also what you'd expect. He's a super nice guy who acts kind of like a father figure to most people. So to answer your question, Jake Gyllenhaal and Emma Watson are the worst I've heard about so far. Not a movie set but has to do with entitled actors. I waited on Kirsten Dunst at Uma Thurman's sister engagement party out in the Hamptons. I went from having a celebrity crush on her to not being able to stand her by the end of the night. She ran out of cigarettes at one point and made a huge ordeal over the fact that when she asked staff for one, no one had her brand, Yellow American Spirits. To be fair, she was drunk as hell at this point. She demanded that someone go out and get her cigarettes, and my manager made me oblige. I had to leave my entire section for about an hour to go on some crazy hunt during the peak of summer in the Hamptons to find her Yellow American Spirits. After I finally went to give them to her, she didn't say thank you or even make eye contact. She just reached out, took them out of my hands and pretended like I didn't exist. Uma Thurman on the other hand was a delight. Very polite and respectful. My mom's friend did security for concerts. She always told us about how nice the bands were, but Adele was a nightmare. Her fans started to line up before her concert outside of the stadium and Adele refused to do sound check because she didn't want anyone to hear her for free and you couldn't look at her when she spoke to you. AC/DC was the nicest band she encountered and the Foo Fighters. Chris F. O'Donnell. Hands down the worst. This a-hole is literally the worst I have seen in the industry. This extremely minor television actor and former model, see his fattest neck, thinks he is not only talented but divine and will wonder aloud why lessers are doing something near him. Chris once complained to production that a slightly overweight security guard was assigned to an area near catering. F. Chris O'Donnell. Chris, if you're reading this, you are a fiend pole smoker and your neck is fat. Everyone laughs at you when you are not around, especially production. Helen Hunt. More like Helen C. If Helen and Chris got together and got to knockin' hooves, the ground would open up and hell would regurgitate Katherine Heigl. I watched Marissa Tomei yell at a PA who had just slipped and broken his leg in front of her to get out of her way. Jamie Foxx was such a racist and mean MFer on Ray that our driver took the meanest, waxiest, smelliest dump in history in his trailer. Extremely unprofessional, but it immediately raised crew member morale as everyone knew this fiend baby came back to the trailer one day to find his toilet destroyed with remnants in and outside of it. Steven Seagal. Imagine forming your entire identity and life's work around being an action hero martial artist only to end up being a hairy lardass. It must be like starting out looking like Pierce Brosnan and Pokemon evolving into Jesse Ventura. There are also some really cool people out there. My favorites: LL Cool J, MG Kelly, even if he's just a big pothead. Lindsay Lohan. I haven't seen her in a while. I worked with her back when people didn't really know she had a drinking problem. She pulled the old Grey Goose in a water bottle move. I thought she was a great person, just had problems. I hope she found help. Howard Stern and the Stern Show in general. Howard talks about how high maintenance he is, but his staff is very good about preparing you and he never gave me shit as long as my ducks were in a row. I don't particularly care for his wife Beth. Seems like she's only nice to you if you're someone. Mark Harmon is the fiend man. Here are some people who I found to be not good or bad, just strange. Gerard Butler is about 18 years old in his head. Christopher Walken is literally just as insane as you might think. Joaquin Phoenix is like that guy who wants to be your friend but is impaired by several layers of mental illness. Samuel L. Jackson is very into adult films. No, you don't get it. Very big fan of adult films. Tom Cruise is a fiend wacko. No surprise here. If Tom decided to talk to you, he would get inappropriately interested in minutiae about you. I mentioned I like 3 creamers in my coffee and he thought it was just about the most interesting fiend thing he had ever heard in his life.